Ask a lot of kids what they want to be when they grow up, and firefighter is at the top of the list. But for Kim Hickey's son, John, it wasn't just a pipe dream.
He wanted to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. My father and his father and all of them were firemen. And my son just said, it runs in the family, Mom.
Just ask John's namesake, his uncle.
Once he got older, we actually both joined the volunteer fire departments at the same time. He joined Baltimore County, I joined Carroll County. We kind of made it a little bit of a competition, but he was very passionate about the fire department.
He was a great firefighter. He knew his job, and you could trust him to complete his task.
He had your back.
He had your back.
But for having such a serious vocation, John was a lighthearted soul.
I always remember his laughter, that loud, obnoxious laughter he had, telling his own stories, and they weren't funny. But he would laugh and somehow catch you up on that loud, obnoxious laugh.
But then, at 31 years old, John Hickey had a lot to be happy about, a career on the rise, and a new girlfriend he was crazy about. They'd only been dating for a few weeks, but John was already all in.
He was excited about meeting Jen because she was the first girl that he knew that liked hockey. He said he found his mate.
Yeah, he posted in a relationship on Facebook.
In a relationship. He was just happy. Yeah,
he posted it before he actually asked me. He's like, I hope you're okay with that. I was like,
Confident,
yeah.
But Jen says she wasn't so immediately sure. She'd been burned before, ironically, by another firefighter. His name was Daniel Green, and Jen had just gotten out of a dysfunctional months-long relationship with Green at the time she met John.
I wasn't unsure, but coming from where I've been before, I questioned it, which I shouldn't have.
As for that career on the rise, after years of volunteering at various stations around Baltimore County, John Hickey was finally being accepted to become a full-time Baltimore City firefighter.
He was so excited about getting into the city fire department. He fought all this time, and he finally made it into it.
One of the things that we were actually working on for John was getting his grandfather's fire department badge, to be able to pin that on him when he came out of the academy.
The future was bright.
Mm-hmm.
But someone watching from the shadows was about to change all of that. It was just this past November that John went home to his Upper Fells Point apartment, locked his door, and was never heard from again.
How did you hear, Jen?
I'm the one who called the police. I didn't hear from John for a day, and with it being a new relationship, I didn't know if that was typical of him. So I gave him the day, and we had plans that night, which I thought was really unusual. So I messaged one of his friends, said, is this normal? She's like, I'll give it till morning.
How much did it worry you that he didn't check in knowing you had plans that night?
I was sick to my stomach all day. Something wasn't right.
You knew?
I couldn't figure it out. I called the police the next day.
When officers arrive at John's apartment to do a wellness check, they find the door locked as he'd left it. Not long after that, a knock on Jen's door.
The officer came over. They didn't tell me how or why or what the cause was, but they did say that he had passed.
How hard was that for you?
Probably the hardest thing I've ever had to go through.
Even harder when she finds out how John died. Shot in the head while sitting on the couch, executed in cold blood.
Never thought anything like this would happen at all. Being in the fire department, you're always vigil of things, everything around you. And you never think about something like this. I'm sorry. Just trying not to do this.
But when it came to who killed John, his loved ones were as baffled as they were heartbroken.
Generally speaking, John just made friends with everybody. So nobody really knew what was going on. And we just couldn't believe that this could happen because he loved everybody.
So was it just a random crime? Maybe a robbery gone wrong?
It appears to be senseless. You have a young man who's about to bloom. You know, we understand that he had just gotten a job with the fire department here in the city, that we know he had everything to live for. Why someone would do this to him, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Police search John's apartment for clues and find nothing missing or even out of place.
With the way we found a location, it's particularly puzzling.
And then a break. Investigators find a back door to John's apartment left slightly ajar. And not far from that, a camera. What it reveals will leave John's loved ones, and in particular his girlfriend Jen, stunned beyond belief.
Did you ever think this was a possibility?
No.
As a firefighter in the Baltimore area, John Hickey risked his life to help others, only to lose his life at the hands of a killer with a gun.
He was robbed of his life. All of us would go into a fire, willing, but you know, you're still fighting that fire, but he had no chance to fight this guy. And it's just not fair. It's just not fair.
John's loved ones still struggling to make sense of it all.
It still doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
I mean, it still doesn't. You know, it's like right now, you're waiting for the bell to go off and hear him come running down the steps, beating everybody, and you're on the truck, and it's just work as usual. But knowing that's not going to happen, it takes a small piece of you.
So who shot the beloved 31-year-old dead in his apartment? As it turns out, detectives had an eyewitness, a surveillance camera behind John's building. And after reviewing video from that night, police announced the arrest of this man, a former firefighter from another town.
Did you know this fellow?
Not at all.
But John's girlfriend did. It was the man from whom she'd broken up just 2 months before, her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Green.
Did you see this coming? No indication whatsoever.
None.
Jen says John had never even met his accused killer, and that she thought Daniel was out of her life for good, especially since, as hard as it is for her to admit, Daniel Green was a married man.
How does something like this happen, Jen?
I keep asking myself that over and over. I don't understand.
After his arrest, Daniel Green is charged with first-degree murder, with authorities claiming he was, quote, positively identified through the video surveillance and the only individual that is observed going into John's apartment. So far, police have said only that the motive was, quote, domestic-related. The implication being that John got caught up in a lethal love triangle with his girlfriend's ex, one he didn't even know existed.
If you listen to the prosecutors, this was a crime of rage, perhaps jealousy.
Unfortunately,
Who does this? Who shoots a guy in the head just because they're jealous?
We wouldn't know.
I just think this guy was a coward.
We don't have that
And
mentality.
look at what John had. This guy no longer has that. John's a firefighter. This guy isn't anymore. The guy had the life he wished he had.
Crime Watch Daily has reached out to Green's attorney, who declined to be interviewed at this time. But he did give us a statement, which reads in part, Daniel Green has maintained his innocence since his arrest. Mr. Green was advised that he was on a video that connected him to the alleged incident, but police have refused to let him see it. Since his arrest and indictment, the state's attorney's office has not provided his counsel with any evidence that would connect Mr. Green to the incident in question. In addition to that statement, Green's attorney says that Daniel has a rock-solid alibi for that night. He was at home nearly an hour away, in bed with his wife.
Do you think justice will be served in this case?
He's in central booking, so hopefully.
Exactly what justice for John will look like remains to be seen. But the pain left by the crime for which Daniel Green stands accused is undeniable. We were there on the day John's loved ones laid him to rest, a somber occasion made all the more difficult because of how this firefighter lost his life.
We can deal with, as terrible as it is, a line of duty death, but from somebody to be robbed from us for no reason at all is one of the hardest things to deal with.
It's really hard because he was my only baby. And now I have nobody. I'm not going to be a grandmother now. I'm not going to get to see any of his little kids following his steps. He was just a lovely kid.
Real good guy, and he will be missed. He will be missed.
Yes.